Hi, I'm Eric Johnson. I'm the Executive Vice President of Engineering here at GitLab. It's September 3rd, 2020, and I'm doing a company-wide AMA. So we've got our document open. It looks like Mark has the first question. Do you want to voice that over, Mark?
Yeah, my question was, I was kind of curious as to what the executive VP of engineering might have as far as a home network goes, and just wondering if you're uh, got something as nerdy as as the title might imply, or if it's just normal networking stuff.
Pretty, yeah, disappointing answer. Probably normal networking stuff. My routers and Wi-Fi right now are just Google Homes. So I've got 5 of them around the house, including one in my garage. And I like them because they, unlike the new Nest wireless routers, these ones have Ethernet cable. So I can put a Google Home somewhere near my TV and just hardwire that one to hardwire the TV or the Apple TV or whatever to the router, and then you have a really strong signal. Whereas I think the Nest ones are uh, your Wi-Fi only at that point, so not as ideal from my perspective. So pretty plain, but like it just works. I mean, they do really good easy mesh networking essentially, and I can go in and create like a kids network and stuff like that. So that works for me. I have recently got kind of nerdy on the audio visual front. So you can see my camera looks a little bit different now. I got a fancy camera and some software, so I can do cool stuff like picture-in-picture screen sharing and whatnot. And so that's where I've been investing my technical energy, is lighting, cameras, booms. But the being a former full-time engineer and hence a nerd, as you describe, I think I'm not done until I do cable management. So I've got this whole thing set up and working, and I'm sure people are like, oh, show me a picture of your setup. Like, no, not even close. I'm only halfway done. I'm gonna have to route all the wires and cables around, make it look really neat, like a data center, and then I'll take the picture and put it up there. But I do have an MR in flight to my README, which if you Google Eric Johnson GitLab README, I think it'll come up, and I'm going to put some information in there about the stuff that I set up and how I did it and all that sort of stuff. And credit to Darren Murph and Yob over at remote.com and XGitLabber for giving me 90% of what I was able to figure out. They gave me a huge head start on this stuff.
All right, well, that was still a fairly nerdy answer, so I think you're good.
Yeah, I mean, because of my day job, I don't get to do as much pure technology as I would want, and also the kids. I've got 3 kids: a 1-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 5-year-old. So I don't have a lot of spare time. But my project list in Google Keep is just getting longer and longer and longer. So eventually, the kids will, get back to school or something like that, and give me more free time, and I'm going to get my hands dirty again with all this stuff. Start programming daily again, do more hardware projects and stuff like that. And on the kids front, we found this company called KiwiCo. They make these like preset boxes of little science experiments and things to build and little robots and stuff like that for the kids. So maybe the nerdiest thing I do right now is build these children's science experiments with my kids, and that scratches the itch a little bit as far as technology goes.
Yeah,
So
of course. Yeah, of course, you could just get your kids to the point where they're doing the work for you.
that's the long-term strategy. Yeah, I'm doing a lot of the building right now, but I'm gonna train them up.
Well, I just know that when kids are that young at that age, they're easy to talk into crawling through a tight crawl space with a piece of cable.
Yeah. Yeah, if I'm gonna wire Ethernet around my home, I could get them in the crawl space for sure. All right, 2, Craig.
Hello. Yeah, I was just asking where's the strangest place you worked at remotely? I'm in the back of my car right now. I was sitting in the front seat, but the seat's so uncomfortable with a hot laptop in my lap, and I'm lakeside too. So I figured I'd ask where you and other people have found themselves during this remote during lockdown with COVID.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I've worked anywhere unusual as a result of the stay-at-home orders. In the past, though, I think it was my 3rd company. My 2nd company actually. I took a few weeks off because my dad's a sailor, so he was able to retire, buy his dream boat, and sail. One of the things he wanted to do is sail across the Atlantic. And so I couldn't take 5 or 6 weeks off to do that, but I took 3 weeks off, and I met him in the Azores and sailed to Lisbon, Portugal with him. So about 4 or 5 days offshore. And we had a sat phone that had like, I don't know, 28 baud or something like that. And I did have to check email a couple of times because 3 weeks it's a pretty long time to take a vacation. Usually it's like 2 max, usually 1 for me. So yeah, believe it or not, I had to check email at that company. This is back in like 2007 over a the equivalent of one of those old modems, like when you had AOL as a kid, like that sound and everything. So I checked email over that in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean.
Oh wow! Yeah, I have a gorgeous view. The reason I'm at a lake is all the pools are locked down right now, and it's the only option for my kids who are competitive swimmers to actually practice for swim meets. So I can't complain about the view or being lakeside on a daily basis. So I was just curious what other folks are doing.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah, I didn't pick up that was a trunk lid behind you, but that makes sense now. I'm like, oh, you're under one of those like awnings that people put up at sporting events and stuff like that. Now I can see your gate. Yeah. Oh, nice view.
Yeah, there's only so long you can sit in a cramped car with a laptop on your desk. So I'm just standing. People are probably looking at me going, why is he talking to his car right now? So.
Yeah. And I streaming video will press the CPU on a laptop, unfortunately. So how about Mike, number 3?
Yeah, so I was doing some perusing on LinkedIn and was interested in your kind of the high level on your journey from studying philosophy in college to now being a VP of engineering.
Yeah, so for people that are interested in coming to GitLab, know that we don't require. Well, a lot of people have a 4-year computer science degree, or some have a software engineering degree, which is a newer thing, but we don't require it, and lots of people don't have that, including myself. So my journey was a little bit more circuitous than most. I will say that, like, if you look at, in Silicon Valley at least, if you look at the engineering leadership ranks, you will see a slight overrepresentation of things like history degrees and philosophy degrees and things like that, because a lot of the job has to do with understanding systems, but also understanding people and being able to communicate really effectively. And so there's dozens of us, I'll say, but it's definitely not the common path. Like I wouldn't recommend it. My path though is I actually started as electrical engineering, so I was highly technical starting school. Went to my first day of classes sophomore year, though, was just kind of like disenchanted. I think I went in assuming I was going to get to do robotics and a lot of physical world stuff, and ended up being a lot of abstract math. So I could do the math, but I didn't really enjoy it. So I walked out of my first day of classes and went to my advisor's office, and I kind of had 2 options, and philosophy was an interest of mine, and then computer science and programming was. And I think just because of that experience and being a little bit burned out or disenchanted, my needle went to the other end of the spectrum, and I chose philosophy. But that ended up being, I think, in retrospect, given that I survived and found a modicum of success doing that, I think it was a good decision, because the program I went to, it was one of only like 8 continental philosophy programs in the United States. So I was reading a lot. If people have worked with me, I still occasionally quote Socrates or Immanuel Kant or stuff like that. So I still use it. It taught me how to think critically. And then I was still programming on the side. So I'm really fortunate to have taken that path, when you can still kind of like teach yourself to code and still get a really nice career in the technology industry. I don't know if that's changing. Like maybe 20 years from now, you'll have to have the paper degree, like a lot of other fields. You just have to have the formal education to be considered. I hope that's not the case. I'm glad that wasn't the case when I was coming up, but I kept programming, and then I graduated, and the intent was to kind of go get a PhD and be a philosophy professor, because that's the only thing you can do with that. Degree is by far the least practical of all the degrees you could study, aside from the fact that it will positively affect everything else you do in your life. But to do continental philosophy, like all my professors spoke at least 5 or 6 languages. I mean, they were all fluent in English, French, German, and usually ancient Greek, Latin, or both. And I just don't have that talent for languages. And that's just sort of like table stakes for doing continental philosophy. So I just didn't think in those terms. And so I kind of wandered for a couple of years trying to figure out what I was doing, working random jobs and things like that. And then I would go home, and I was living with my parents, and I would program like all night, and then wake up and do these jobs I hated the next day. And then eventually the light bulb went off of like, maybe I should do the thing I'm passionate about, like open source software and programming and stuff like that. Maybe that should be my career, and I should invert this whole thing. And so I was able to scramble and get my first technology job just on the strength of my portfolio of personal projects and things like that. Went in right at the bottom level, absolutely the rock bottom, and just worked really hard. And was lucky. I had some really good both technical and cultural mentors, and they gave me a head start. I got some opportunity to go into management pretty early because people appreciate that I could understand the technical stuff, and then I could also communicate effectively with customers and executives and things like that. And then the rest is sort of history. So again, not what I would recommend if your goal is to do certain things or have my title in another company or something like that. But it worked for me.
That's awesome. Great answer. Thank you. And I think, yeah, I have the next question as well, which is, you touched on Kiwi a little bit, but I'm curious about one personal project and one work project you're really excited about right now.
Yeah, I think the probably the personal project is like the new audio visual setup I've got going, the lights and the camera and the software and stuff like that. That's what I've been spending the last few weeks on. And as I mentioned, in a few more weeks of cable management, and it'll be done, and I could take a picture of it. For work, I think I'm really excited about our internship program. It's kind of something we just did, but we're able to, we ran a pilot over the summer. We're able to make 3 full-time hires out of it. And we're going to formalize that into an ongoing process. And it'll probably be something that runs continuously as opposed to like a summer university focused internship program. I think it'll be something that would be open at any time to do. Because we don't want it to be purely a university recruiting program. We want it to be open to anyone that's new to technology and is getting their first job in the field. And that might be an ex-felon. It might be a mother returning to work after taking several years off taking care of the kids. I've heard stories about, they're shutting down coal mines in Kentucky. And you've got a bunch of like really technical people whose industry is going away and they're starting to get into software engineering. It might be someone like that is looking to move from one technical field to the software technology field, or university students, whatever it might be. It should be kind of open to all. So I'm excited about that. And then laddering off of that, we also have a new working group, a new OKR this quarter to design a free education program for underrepresented groups in tech. So GitLab has a lot of technical skills internally, a lot of people that are passionate about helping and giving others opportunity. So we're going to try to create a program where we can organize GitLabbers volunteering, being willing to dedicate their skills and expertise, hopefully partner with someone that has curriculum and has a pool of students ready to learn, and donate some of our time back to people that have been denied opportunity previously. And kind of optional to that working group, we're also going to see if we can maybe solve if you really want to reach people that don't have opportunity. You can't even assume that they've got a high bandwidth internet connection and a high powered laptop to do programming exercise with it, right? So there's some people that really are lacking the infrastructure to do remote learning. We're going to see if we have a way to solve that through hardware donation program or something like that. I think it's optional because we don't know how exactly to do it, but we're going to at least see if we can solve something about that. So I'm really excited about working on that program with Rose, our People Ops business partner, and a bunch of other folks volunteering. Rebecca Spainhauer has been great in support, and Greg in support, and Candace in People Ops as well. Jean, number 5.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. So I've got a follow-up from Mike's first question, and I think you've touched on some of the in your answer on this a little bit, but similar to you, I don't have a computer science degree. So if you had to go and give a speech at a school today to the youth, would you encourage them? And maybe it was all about computer engineering. Would you encourage them to go for a computer science degree, or would you encourage them to utilize all the online training resources and other opportunities that exist to learn to code?
Yeah, I mean, if I was speaking in university, I probably wouldn't advise them to leave the university and do online schooling. I wouldn't want to anger the professors, right? So I'd tell them, pursue what you're most passionate about, like what you're drawn to in your spare time. I think it's really important that you have sort of intrinsic motivation for the stuff that you're going to end up being good at. Some people pursue careers because they think it's going to make them a lot of money or something like that, but you're not going to be happy doing that, and you're going to find yourself competing with people who are intrinsically passionate about that area, and they're likely to outperform you. So I think whatever it is, you've got to be passionate about what you're doing. I think computer science is great. I mean, since I didn't study it and I wanted to be a professional programmer, I had to go back and fill in the gaps in my experience. There's certain things about it I had sort of just derived by programming all the time. Of course, you learn slower when you're self-taught versus that, but you got to go back and learn things like big O notation and stuff like that. Otherwise, it's just hard to function as a professional software engineer. So I did things like that. I think, as I mentioned, I'm excited that universities have kind of had this light bulb go off, and now they're actually teaching software engineering as a major, which of course includes a good bit of computer science, but also a lot more practical skills and presumably project work and things like that. I think that if that works out, that'll probably end up being a better fit for having that long-term career. I mean, I remember when I was in college in the 90s, like I was rooming with and living in a dorm with a lot of computer science majors, and they weren't learning source control or anything like that. They were just learning all these like sort of principles and stuff. And then they went out and they got their first job and they had to learn what source control is for the first time. They didn't come into the workforce equipped with any of those skills. So I'm presuming that something called a software engineering major in school would teach them those skills. But I also think, like, I love the option that you mentioned as well, because I follow that. It sounds like you follow that. You can teach yourself a tremendous amount of this stuff outside of the university system. So if you don't have the opportunity, I think that's a perfectly viable option. And I encourage you to get involved in open source projects, because obviously, like I said, being self-taught is really hard. You need to find a community of people that just know more than you, that will challenge you, that will teach you. And so like an open source project would be a great thing to start contributing to, and you'll learn quite a bit from doing. So I'd probably recommend some combination of things. And honestly, if you're studying, if you're at a 4-year university and you're getting a computer science degree, you should probably also be doing open source contribution as well. And so try to blend as many of these approaches as you possibly can.
All right, I think I'm up next. I've got the next two. So for one, I want to say I love your perspective. I resonate a lot. I'm self-taught. I had to kind of carve out the opportunities in my career. And background-wise, I was a software engineer, but now I'm a solutions architect. So I kind of went to that sales engineering side. But I'm curious to know, I noticed that your experience is primarily with startups. What are 2 or 3 resources or inspirations that you think have the greatest ROI for people that are either wanting to start a startup or contribute to more startups in the future?
Yeah, I would say, I've never founded a startup, and that's a big leap. So that's experience I don't have. But the founders I've worked with, Sid included, they're just like so passionate about the not just what they're creating, but the problem that they're solving for people. And so if you're looking to found a company, definitely make sure it's something in that realm where you just can't sleep because you're thinking about this so often. And if you're looking to join a startup, definitely look for a startup that's led by one of those people. Because if you not all of it, I mean, obviously, just based on how many people found a startup, it's a tiny minority of people that have the will or even the opportunity to do something like that. But if you're going to work with one of them, make sure that they are that type of person about the product you're building and the value you're delivering to customers or users. The other thing is startups are hard. So you have to be the type of person that's kind of like motivated by ambiguity and by not having those things, right? If you're the type of person where you expect to go into a company and there's like a really polished onboarding program and there's all these processes that are pre-existing you can follow, and that's fine. A lot of people love prescription and they love to do those things. It's probably bigger, more stable companies that have all that stuff. But those big companies were a startup at one point, and someone there was building those programs, or at least the first version of those programs later. And they were excited about, hey, we don't have something that I want. I'm going to actually build it. And that's something that isn't necessarily enjoyable to people, but those are startup people. They're builders, not just in terms of the product, but about the whole company. And they like thriving in situations where you just don't have everything you need. But hey, that means I get to create the first, probably suboptimal version of it, and that's okay. And so be aware of that. We talked about interns a few times up here in the agenda before. I'd say my advice to people in school or earlier in their career is usually try to figure out if you're a startup person or a big company person as early as possible, and internships are a great way to do that. So like a lot of interns, they want to get that, you know, Google or Facebook, the big name on their resume, and that's a smart decision. But then I think the ones that really get this insight, the next internship they do, like maybe that's between, you know, sophomore and junior year. Then between junior and senior year, they'll do like a startup. So they'll be in the exposed brick loft with 5 other people just hacking away on something, and they'll get that experience as well. Because some people, they go for the stable thing, and then halfway through their career, they've been doing it 15 years. They work for their first startup, and then they realize they love it, but that means they missed out on that experience kind of earlier in their career. So the earlier you can figure out what type of company you're at, the better. But the irony about startups is you join one, you want to build, you want it to be successful. What happens is it becomes a big company, right? And so you have to be the type of person that can scale with the company, or just have the, make sure you're self-aware about when it's time for you to say, it's time for me to go to the next startup and build something else, rather than staying on board and being miserable because you're working for a big company and that's never what you sort of intended to do. And the last thing I would say is just like really don't underestimate how much you need to learn in the current system around how equity works, right? I think a lot of people get surprised by what it takes to exercise options, what it means to your tax exposure and things like that. And the rules aren't always friendly to employees, or they certainly aren't if you get surprised by them. Like some people get in a position where they want to move on and go to that next exciting startup, but they can't afford to exercise their options. They can't afford the tax hit or something like that. So it's a really important part of any startup sort of compensation framework, particularly in the early days, but you've got to understand the mechanics of how it works. So I'll give the standard risk-free advice I give to everybody, which is go talk to a tax attorney that understands this stuff, and in your region, because every country is different, or in some countries it's different province to province. Yeah, talk to others and get some good advice about that stuff, because it is important. It does have a value. It's more speculative than cash and other forms of compensation, but it's really important that you figure that stuff out. And also you can search for companies that do the best job of aligning the investors' incentives, the executives' incentives with the employee incentives. So some companies do, like, everybody has common stock. There's no like liquidation preference, or there are different shares of classes of stock and things like that. And that's good, because then, okay, well, these people have more stock than I do, but to the extent we're successful, it's proportional. And that doesn't exist at every company. So that's, as you're evaluating startups, it's really important to get a sense of like, what's their cap table like, and how how employee friendly are the rules that they've set up. And I think that's been getting better and better and better over my career. And organizations like Y Combinator are starting to give pretty positive and standardized advice to their startups. I'm seeing more startups do a better job of this lately.
That was awesome. That was really good advice. Yeah, the finance piece, that's a newer one for me. So I appreciate the reiterating it, because I've been trying to focus on that a lot more, learn a little bit more about it. So we're closing in on time, so it's okay if you cut this one a little short. But so I love the perspective around increasing access to opportunities, the way you were speaking earlier about the hiring model and things like that. That's definitely the route I took with self-taught. And sometimes I kind of feel like when I was going through the interview process in my career, and not having a degree would get in the way, it kind of felt like somebody trying to hire a trucker, but then asking if you know how to build a truck. And then, and it's like, well, you don't necessarily need to know how to build that yet to use it. And then sometimes they expect someone that builds a truck to be a trucker, and it's not all that's, and I felt like that was kind of the misunderstanding. But one thing that really mitigated that well for me was going to like a 10-week boot camp. So I already had some systems knowledge, I had some scripting knowledge, and I went to a boot camp, which had a lot of top-down pressure from companies that recruited from it. So that the curriculum was built on the market, right? The free market, so when I came out, I was pretty useful. Do we have any, has there been discussions about either contributing to boot camps, trying to get our name more known? Because unfortunately, for example, everything was not using GitLab, which I think GitLab would be a great resource in these boot camps. Has there been any discussion around that?
No, but we might bring that up in the working group I just mentioned about this education program, because that hasn't come up to date. I should check in more with the sort of like boot camp ecosystem, for lack of a better term, because like I'm thinking back to my last company where Yeah, I was there between 2014 and 2018 or something like that, 3 years. And over that time, that's when boot camps really just sort of exploded. They were everywhere. And we actually started to become suspicious because we found like the quality of the programs was really uneven. And so some people came through great ones and we started to learn which the great ones were, and they were ready to work. And other ones were really just not doing a great job giving people opportunity and giving them the skills they needed to be successful. So we didn't treat it as a black mark, but we kind of treat it as like a null signal of like, oh, this person went through a boot camp, great, but like we still need to make sure they're passing our technical assessment and whatnot. That may have improved or changed, and so but we tend to just focus on our standards here. If you can do the job, you should be able to get the job. That's the idea. Nothing else should really matter. And of course, when I say do the job, it includes all these sort of culture add behaviors and things like that as well. It's not really about programming. But this is one of the reasons why our technical assessments are meant to be, some companies do all these computer science puzzles, like invert a red black tree or something like that, something like very few programmers ever had to do on the job, but you do it nonstop in a computer science program. And then other ones do these sort of like canned assessments. Or I think what we used to do when I first started was you'd actually work on a real bug or something like that. And so the computer science puzzles are problematic because they're not close enough to the job. Doing real work is problematic because if it's literally a new work item, then you can't compare candidate to candidate. You don't have sort of an objective standard of how they did. It was too biased towards how that interviewer was feeling that day or how they approached problems or something like that. So where we've arrived is we have a set of exercises that are realistic, but they are repeatable. It's the same one each time. And so that gives us a better sense of, can the person do work that is very similar to what we need them to do? But then also we can measure how different people have performed and therefore how the test performs, assessing successful people. And so I'd urge you to, if you're out there, people watching this on YouTube, maybe interviewing for jobs, like try to seek out those companies that are choosing the middle path there and assessing people based on, repeatable but realistic work and not the sort of pie in the sky computer science problems that don't relate particularly well to the everyday job of programming. So I'll bring up the bootcamp thing because that might be, obviously there's, we're looking for someone to partner with here, like a program, as I mentioned, with curriculum and students, and we haven't thought of boot camps, but maybe that's a good place for us to look. And it is, this whole program, whether it's a boot camp or something else, is meant to be a lead in to our internship. So we're trying to go upstream in the recruiting funnel, and get to people who, maybe they applied for our internship and they weren't successful the first time around. I'd love to have something we say, hey, but don't go away, keep contributing to our open source project, join this program, and you'll probably be ready to have for an internship in 6 months. And then that could turn into the full-time role. So there's something kind of like boot campy about that. And nice Zoom background. I love the.
Yeah, I redecorated. Yeah.
Cool. Well, it looks like we're a little bit over 25 minutes, but still short of the 30 minutes. So let's end it here. But thanks everybody for the great questions. If you've got more, come to my EVPE channel, and you can welcome to ask things async, or I do office hours every Thursday or Wednesday, depending if it's EMEA friendly or APAC friendly time. So welcome to come there and chat. We'll talk soon.